There are places in this world where the sand does not simply bury the past, it seems to guard it with a silent, jealous vigilance. Far south of the Egyptian dynasties, along a bend in the Nile that glitters like molten brass, a kingdom rose that history almost forgot. We tell ourselves that the great civilizations left obvious footprints. But as you stand on the sun-scorched plains of northern Sudan, that certainty begins to crumble. The wind here does not howl. It whispers through the acacia trees in a language older than the pharaohs, carrying the dust of a lost metropolis. That metropolis was Kerma, the capital of the first great Nubian empire, a city that once commanded an army of archers and a treasury of gold. Its very existence challenges our tidy narrative of history, where Egypt reigned supreme and all other realms cowered in its shadow. For centuries, the monumental ruins near the Third Cataract were dismissed as a mere Egyptian trading outpost, a primitive echo of a superior culture. Imagine the first explorer to truly see the western deffufa, that massive flat-topped mountain of mudbrick rising with no columns, no statues, just sheer unadorned volume. Its walls are not decorated with hieroglyphs. They are mute, brooding, a temple designed not to glorify gods with stories, but to crush human scale with its weight. Inside, the narrow corridors twist like a labyrinth, carved into a giant earthen heart, the air still and thick with the scent of ancient charcoal. This was no Egyptian copy. This was the sacred core of a wholly original power, a structure whose exact ritual purpose still haunts the edge of our understanding. You walk through the dim passages and feel the presence of the priest-kings, who once stood where you stand, their footsteps long since absorbed by the patient earth. The hook of Kerma's mystery is not a written riddle, but the profound silence of a civilization that spoke through monumental architecture alone. And so the question hangs in the air like the shimmer of heat on the horizon. What happened to the hidden power that once rivaled the might of Memphis itself? The evidence lies scattered across 3 distinct sections of the ancient city, each a chapter in a story that no ancient scribe ever finished. There is the walled royal city, where intricate palaces and administrative halls once bustled with a life that defied the oppressive desert heat. A short distance away lies the vast funerary landscape, the 3rd chapter, where tens of thousands of tumuli swell from the earth like a petrified sea of grief. The most extravagant of these burial mounds are truly colossal, some stretching 90 meters across, encased in rings of white quartz pebbles that blaze under the noon sun. When archaeologists first breached these royal tombs, they found not simple potsherds, but an empire's final statement carved in sacrifice. They were not slaves thrown into a pit. Many were buried with ornate jewelry, ostrich feather fans, and golden daggers, suggesting a willing or brutally enforced loyalty. One king was discovered resting on a lavish bronze bed, his body adorned with a silver and lapis lazuli crown, a luxury that screamed of immense wealth. But the most chilling artifact found beside him was a remarkably preserved leopard skin loincloth, the symbol of Nubian spiritual and martial authority. This was no remote village. This was a sophisticated state with a rigid class system, capable of marshalling massive labor for its deffufas and its dead. The workshops of Kerma tell a parallel story of industrial artistry. One master metalworker forging a bronze dagger so finely balanced it could pierce any armor of the age. Pottery kilns produced delicate, tulip-shaped beakers of impossible thinness, their red polished surfaces catching the firelight like liquid blood. These artifacts scream of an identity that was not derivative, but proudly, defiantly indigenous, a rejection of Egyptian aesthetics in favor of something wilder. Yet the most critical evidence of Kerma's power lies not in its wealth, but in its military correspondence, fragments of which survived in foreign archives. Fearful letters from Egyptian frontier governors describe the vile Kush and their swift chariots raiding deep into the Thebaid, a militarized south that no wall could contain. Kerman warriors were master archers, the legendary Pitati, trained from boyhood to send a volley of poisoned arrows into the sky that would darken the sun. The city stood as the head of a vast trade network, a funnel for ebony, ivory, and exotic animal pelts flowing out of the African interior toward the Mediterranean. For nearly 1,000 years, from 2500 to 1500 BCE, this urban center flourished, building a legacy that should have been etched in every history book ever opened. And yet, standing in the remnants of the audience hall now, you hear only the crunch of your own boots on shattered alabaster and the hollow hum of oppressive noon heat. The evidence of greatness is undeniable, but the silence surrounding its end is a heavy, suffocating blanket that muffles all clear answers. There is a gap between the physical reality of these massive walls and the narrative we have tried to stitch together from the biased ink of its Egyptian rivals. The Egyptians, masters of propaganda, referred to Kerma only as a subdued vassal, a wretched land, even when their own border walls were crumbling under its assaults. This is the first dead end in the labyrinth. The victors do not always write the history. Sometimes they simply erase it by omission. So we are left with a civilization that appears in the archaeological record fully formed, supremely confident, and then suddenly, violently, almost gone. Were they erased by a climate that starved their cattle, or by a sword sharper than any they had ever forged? The labyrinth opens its first corridor with the simplest, most brutal theory: invasion and conquest at the hands of a vengeful Egypt. Around 1500 BCE, the pharaohs of the New Kingdom, particularly the warrior Thutmose I, launched a massive southern campaign of annihilation. Egyptian stelae boast of reaching the back of the river, of slaughtering the desert tribes and razing the mighty city of the vile Kushites to blackened earth. Some historians theorize that the deffufas themselves were systematically desecrated during this invasion, their golden icons stripped and their priesthood executed. Fire-scorched layers found within the royal city do bear a terrifying witness to a final conflagration, a day of smoke and screaming iron. You can almost picture the Egyptian chariots surging through the broken gates, their bronze axes shattering the delicate tulip beakers in a storm of vengeance. Where military history falters, a more insidious killer creeps into the narrative, the slow, grinding hand of ecological collapse. Imagine the despair of watching the river that was your god recede year after year, turning lush pasture into a sand-choked wasteland. Over time, a kingdom built on horned cattle and trade caravans would have found itself starving, its political legitimacy evaporating with the moisture in the soil. A darker hypothesis suggests a civil war, a revolt, ignited by the very royal brutality displayed in those mass burial pits. Could the people of Kerma have finally risen against a monarchy that demanded they follow their king into death, shattering the theocracy from within? The fragmented records from the C Group horizon point toward a gradual Egyptianization of Nubian culture long before the military conquest, a silent surrender of native identity. Perhaps Kerma did not fall to an army. Perhaps it simply forgot who it was, trading its leopard skin crowns for the alien comforts of foreign gods and foreign politics. This is the haunting center of the labyrinth, a civilization did not explode. It dissolved, leaving its stone husk as an empty chrysalis. Archaeologists still argue fiercely over ceramic sequences and grave typologies, trying to piece together a chronology from the silent language of broken pots. The rational mind craves a neat bookend, a decisive battle, but Kerma's dust offers only flickering shadows and contradictory whispers. We are blinded by our own logic, expecting a collapse to happen in a day when it can take centuries. Each year, a small, unrecorded tragedy of a little more hunger. The labyrinth of theories leads us not to a minotaur, but to a mirror. We cannot understand Kerma's fall because we refuse to see how complex a society's slow death truly is. Yet among the dead ends, some of the most revealing traces are not found in the grand deffufas, but in the intimate, unhealed wounds of a single human life. Consider the famous sacrificial corridor in Tumulus KX, a narrow, low-silinged passage buried under the quartz pebbles. Along its walls, the bodies of young men were arranged in a seated position, their skulls likely crushed by the collapse of the roof above, a ritual execution frozen in time. But one skeleton, a middle-aged man, shows a different story. His bones carry the terrible spur of a healed bronze arrow wound in his thigh. He did not die in the ritual. He had survived a war years before, a veteran who walked with a limp in service to the very king he was now forced to follow underground. When I think of Kerma, I think of that warrior's limp, the physical memory of pain that he carried into the lavish terror of that dark corridor. The archaeologists who uncovered him, men like George Reisner, were themselves sometimes crippled by the narrative, seeing everything through a prejudiced, Egyptian-centric lens. Reisner, blinded by his own cultural superiority, labeled the tumuli as the tombs of foreign Egyptian governors, an insult that the bones underground seemed to scream against. It took generations of dedicated Nubian and Western scholars, crouching in the dust with toothpicks and soft brushes, to slowly correct this intellectual theft. The human obsession with Kerma is a painful, frustrating love affair between a modern mind craving clarity and an ancient soul determined to keep its secrets. Local communities living in the shadow of the deffufa have always known it was a place of power, weaving stories of jinn and hidden treasure that kept grave robbers at bay for millennia. They tell of a deep, unnatural chill that seeps from the sacred mountain's base at twilight, and of drumming sounds that emanate from the collapsed chambers when no wind blows. Perhaps these tales are not simple superstition, but a passed-down folk memory of the pounding pestles and ritual drums that once echoed inside the living temple. You begin to realize that the true allure of Kerma is not the gold or the bronze. It is the unsettling proximity of absolute human authority and absolute silence. The kings who could command 1,000 souls to die at their word are now unable to protect their own names from the slow erosion of the wind. This is the psychological toll of studying lost worlds. You stand on the precipice of a vanished consciousness, one that loved and murdered and worshipped, and you comprehend none of it fully. We pore over the dental records of the sacrificed, looking for signs of stress, hoping that a cavity or a worn molar might somehow unlock the philosophy of their butchers. Every excavation season, a new piece of the puzzle emerges. A seal impression, an imported Syrian vase shard, and the grand picture only becomes more baffling. It is a maddening silence because the city is not missing. It is right there, baked solid and enormous, yet it speaks in a code we have lost the key to unlock. The enduring enigma of Kerma is not merely about a fallen kingdom. It is a cold, silent lesson about the fragility of all human memory. Think of the mammoth mudbrick platform of the eastern deffufa, a funeral chapel that was once blindingly white, its plaster covered in vibrant paintings of Nile boats and horned goddesses. Now the rains of 3,000 years have washed away every face and every sail, returning the shrine to a mute brown anonymity that blends back into the desert cliff. We are witnessing the final stages of a monument, reverting to pure geology, the conscious human statement dissolving back into the unconscious planet. Some researchers theorize that we have not even found the true royal treasury, that a vault of gold and obsidian lies somewhere under the silt, untouched since that final terrible day. Perhaps that is the last clinging hope of the treasure hunter in all of us. That one unbroken seal might finally whisper the real name of the last king. But what if the truth is simpler and harsher? What if we already know everything of substance, and we simply cannot accept that their lives were not recorded in stone? Kerma was an empire of perishable materials, of leather, wood, and human breath, which vanishes the moment the body stills. The deffufas are not libraries. They are engines of power, spiritual capacitors, and they were never meant to explain themselves to distant strangers stumbling through their corridors. As the sun sinks behind the sacred mountain, casting a long, cold shadow that swallows the entire ancient city, the temperature drops instantly. You can stand there on the edge of the excavated royal city and watch the stars pop into existence, one by one, above the silhouette of the colossal mudbrick altar. Those are the same stars that the Kerman priests charted, reading the celestial river as carefully as they read the earthly one that gave them life. In that moment, the gulf of time does not feel like an abstract concept. It feels like a physical sickness, a vertigo born from standing too close to eternity. The fragments tell us they were fierce, wealthy, and deeply spiritual. But the space between these facts is so vast that it fills instantly with our own modern anxieties. Long after our own cities are glass craters or silent jungles, the deffufa of Kerma will likely still be standing, too massive for any climate to easily erase. It will remain a mute question mark on the face of the earth, long after the last human who cared to ask the question has turned to dust. There is a comfort in believing history is a solved puzzle until you stand at the edge of this Nubian silence, feeling the sand shift treacherously beneath your feet. For now, the hidden power of Kerma remains exactly that, hidden, defiant, refusing to yield its final secrets to the logic of the modern world. And as the darkness completes its conquest of the desert, you realize that some cities are not lost. They are simply waiting, silent and colossal, for our ears to finally learn how to listen.